Hello, I want to take a look at some practice problems from section 5.3 in Algebra 2. And the first one says, determine the number and the type of solutions for the following quadratic equations using the discriminant. So as we take a look at these problems, I'm going to work them out on paper, but I wanted you to be able to see which problem it was. You, on your practices, as you know, get 5 problems, and I'm showing you all of them, at least that I have access to. So I'm going to move the iPad out of the way, and we're going to go ahead and, first of all, I want to point out that the discriminant, which I did a video in section 5.1, talked about the discriminant a little bit. B squared minus 4 times A times C is the discriminant. And what the discriminant does is it tells us, it gives us a number, and then it allows us to figure out how many answers we get and what kind of answers we get. It doesn't tell us what the answer is. If we really wanted to know what the answer was, we would use the quadratic formula, which you'll see in some other videos here in a couple of minutes. But in order to use the discriminant or quadratic formula, we need to have the equation set equal to 0. So we're going to add 11 to both sides. We get x squared minus 6x plus 16 equals 0. And now what we're going to do is we're going to identify the fact that A equals 1. It's the number in front of the x squared term. B equals negative 6. And C equals 16. And we're going to fill those values back into the formula now of B squared minus 4AC. Well, B squared is negative 6 squared minus 4 times A times C. And negative 6 squared, you can type it into the calculator, is positive 36. 4 times 1 times 16 is 64. And if you, I would just type the whole thing into the calculator. We get negative 28. Our discriminant then is negative 28. And the key on this problem is that your answer ended up to be negative. And when your answer ends up to be negative, what happens is that the graph does not cross or touch the x-axis. And the way that we describe the answer then, when we get the discriminant equals negative 28, then the answer in terms of how many answers we're going to get and what kind of answers we're going to get is 2 complex. And by the way, what that means when we get a complex answer is there's an imaginary number as part of the answer. So really what you're writing down typically is discriminant equals negative 28, and then what that tells us is we get 2 complex solutions. But if we look at the next equation on here, it's x squared equals 24x plus 50. It doesn't matter. To me, I tend to like my x squared term to be positive, which is why I'm going to move everything to the left. But it doesn't matter. You can move everything to the right as well, and you will still have the same value when it comes to the discriminant. But I'm going to subtract 24x from both sides. And then I'm going to subtract 50 from both sides. We get x squared minus 24x minus 50 equals 0. Remember, A is 1, the number in front of the x squared. B is negative 24. And C is negative 50. If you moved everything over to the right side, each sign would be different. You'd have A is negative 1, B is positive 24, C is positive 50. Again, it won't make any difference. B squared, negative 24 squared minus 4 times A times C. And this time I'm just going to type it in the calculator. Negative 24 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 50 gives us 776. And what that answer here, or the important part of that answer, is the fact that this is a positive number. And when we get a positive answer, what that means is that we're going to have two real solutions. By the way, the discriminant is 776. So now we've seen a place where the answer is negative, we've seen a place where it's positive. Down here our third problem, which I wish would have been the first problem on there, because this equation's already set equal to 0. So we can start by saying A is 4, B is negative 8, and C is 10, and we can fill that in to our formula. So we get negative 8 squared minus 4 times 10. And again, if we pull up the calculator, negative 8 squared, notice I'm putting parentheses around the negative 8, that's important, minus 4 times 10 gives us negative 96. So our discriminant is negative 96. Again, the important part to notice is that number is negative, and when we get a negative, we're going to get two complex solutions. As we look at our last problem, again, I'm going to move everything to the left. It does not make any difference, but the equation, when we solve with the quadratic formula, when we use the discriminant, our equation has to be set equal to 0. So I'm starting by moving the 7x squared. We also want to write the equation in descending order, in standard form, as the program calls it. So I'm going to subtract the 8x from both sides, and we get 8x squared minus 8x plus 2 equals 0. So having the x squared first, then the x, then the constant, is in the correct order because A is 8, the number in front of the x squared term, B is negative 8, and C is 2. And then we fill in the discriminant, which you can't see anymore on my paper, but it's B squared minus 4 times A times C. And maybe you just want to have that off to the side when you're doing your work, so that you get these problems correct. And we fill this in. Negative 8 squared minus 4 times 8 times 2. And we grab our calculator or Desmos. Don't hesitate to use Desmos. And what we've got, parentheses, negative 8 squared minus 4 times 8 times 2. And we end up with our discriminant equals 0. And when our discriminant equals 0, it means that our quadratic touches. It touches the x-axis. The quadratic touches the x-axis. And because it touches, then we're only going to get one real solution. Again, I could recommend that you go back and look at the video in section 5.1 on the discriminant, but this is a pretty thorough set of examples here for you. When the discriminant's negative, we get two complex. When the discriminant is positive, we get two real. When the discriminant equals 0, we end up with one real solution.